Hello and welcome once again to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Today I'm joined by Dr. Patricia Delgado to talk about all sorts of things, but she is by training and by qualification a Doctor of Psychology with 20 years of experience in organisational and business development. And so we're going to be talking about all kinds of things about behavioural psychology, the impacts that has on business. We're going to cover diversity and inclusion, hybrid working, all kinds of things, as well as obviously a bit about leadership. So it's going to be a really great conversation, and Patricia is a great guest and a great conversationalist. So I hope you all enjoy this episode.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Well, first of all, Patty, thank you so much for taking the time out of your morning, afternoon. Lost track of the time difference.
Yes, it is morning.
There we go. I was nearly there. Much appreciated. It's great to have a chance to talk to you today. Sometimes this is a risk, but not always. I'm going to hand over the reins to you to begin with, to tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce your business and what you get up to the listeners.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much, David, for having me. My name is Dr. Patricia Delgado. I am originally from a beautiful sun city in Texas called El Paso. And so we are the only city in the United States, and this is like a fun fact about El Paso, we're the only city that borders 2 states and 2 countries all at one time. So we're right on the border to Texas and New Mexico, and then on the border of the US and Mexico. So a little fun fact about El Paso that I always like to brag about. I am also the CEO and founder of my research firm called the Bridgify Group, where we focus all our efforts on bridging academic research, right? There's a lot of academic research that's ongoing, and practice. So we're really that main translator between the academic world and the practitioner world, bringing this amazing information together, simplifying it, and then delivering it simplistically for our clients. So hence the word Bridgify. And so that's how we do that with research and practice. I'm also one of 3 co-founders to El Puente Institute, which is the one that I have here on my screen. El Puente is a translation in Spanish for the bridge, and our institute specifically focuses on DEI efforts for organizations that are looking to better recruit and retain the Hispanic Latino workforce. So in the US right now, the Hispanic Latino workforce is the largest minority group, growing in numbers due to immigration, due to number of births that are happening in the Hispanic community. And so we are projecting that in 2050, we will be more than 27% of the population here in the US. And so our workforce is young. Our workforce is dedicated. We always say that Hispanics are very inclusive by nature because we're all about familia. So David, you are part of our familia. And, that is just a very foundational value in any Hispanic that you meet, whether they come from Mexico or from Argentina or from Colombia, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. The familia is a big part of that. So we always say we're very naturally inclusive. And we do predict, my researchers and I, as a doctor in psychology, we constantly do research on this workforce. We are predicting that if organizations are not looking into intentionally recruiting and intentionally retaining this workforce, that their talent pool will be even more of a dry spill, right? And even more, they're going to be looking even more for that talent pool. That's already a concern right now in the business world, as we're seeing that the talent pool is shortening, right? And individuals are being more intentional and in control of where they want to work. I think I've heard throughout some of the research that it's like the individual is interviewing the organization versus the other way around. nowadays, especially with our younger generation. So we are saying that this is an intentional strategy that should be part of an organization's larger strategic plan. So thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about so many different topics and really to be create a bridge between the US and the UK. It's wonderful to be able to do this across the ocean.
Yeah, it's the wonder of the internet and the podcast, isn't it? And
Correct.
it's great to have the opportunities. So, I mean, you mentioned about your research and your institute as well. So obviously there's quite a bit of research going on into diversity and equity and inclusion, particularly in the workplace, because that's the area, isn't it, these days?
Yes.
So what can you tell us about the findings of that research so far?
Yes, so far. So the research that we've done around diversity, equity, and inclusion, we've done some very general, larger research because we both know, David, the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion is large, right? And we can always kind of tackle it in segments. But overall, what the research is saying is, one, organizations need to make DEI a priority in their strategy, in their inclusion plan, in their recruitment and retention plan. Here in the US, there has been some talk about DEI being illegal, just contra to what its full intention is. However, the research still shows that as the world starts becoming more multicultural, if organizations aren't understand, one, the importance of inclusion and belonging, and two, training with a cultural relevant lens on leadership development, there will be some what I call cultural value nudges and kind of friction that happens in the organization. So one, we are becoming more multicultural. Organizations need to understand that. Two, the aspect of belonging and inclusion is very important to our younger generation. So it's no longer, they are asking for this. No, I should correct, demanding this, right? That this part about being inclusive, accepting me for my own identity, however it is that they identify. And so that's the second part. And three, it really is fundamentally the way that organizations should be running from a values and a humanistic perspective, right? We are all different. We all come with different backgrounds, experiences, skill sets. And if organizations aren't tapping into that very intentionally, they possibly can also miss out on institutional knowledge that happens in an organization. So those three things that we're seeing generally in the research right now.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I always like to tie it back to decision making. So, any given decision you're making, the more differing points of view you can consider during that process, the better that process will be and the better the outcome of whatever decision it ends up being. So,
correct. Because the world is changing, right? We saw this during COVID, during the pandemic, it switched just in an instant. Organizations were rattled to their core on how to go full hybrid. And this is not just in the US, we're, all over the world, it routed organizations' traditional ways of working and making decisions. Having different voices and perspectives at the table will only increase the enrichment of information, of experiences into that decision-making process. We also see that the research says, organizations kind of got used to this reactive way of decision making because they had to during the pandemic. There was no other option. They had to make a decision right away. It's time to now, post-COVID, have decision makers learn to, again, step back, reassess, bring all voices to the table, then make decisions, right? This reactive way of making decisions is not going to serve them now moving forward since the pandemic has decreased. It's not completely over, but, it has come to, we do see a light at the end of the tunnel, and this reactive decision-making, it's not going to work for them. I always say leaders need to not chase the change anymore. They need to lead and get in front of the change now. So that does require just a lot of intentionality around decision making and DE&I getting those different voices and perspectives at the table.
Yeah. And so you mentioned retention earlier as well, which I think is interesting, because when we're talking about building diverse and inclusive teams, recruitment gets a lot of attention, because I guess that's kind of the obvious thing, isn't it? It makes sure that people entering the teams are more diverse. But actually, retention is just as important, isn't it? So what can businesses do to improve both of those, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, so that is a great question. And thank you for bringing that up, because I think sometimes recruitment gets a lot more attention than retention, right? But we're seeing that since employees or individuals looking for work are looking for that long-term, a place where they can grow, right? And really be who they are authentically, the retention part comes in. So for us in our DEI work, a lot of our work, especially in the El Puente Institute, is focused on the Hispanic workforce. However, we are seeing that in our research from a generational perspective, from a cultural perspective, the concept of succession planning, the concept of looking at what do your career paths look like? Are those career paths for employees being communicated very much in a detailed, granular manner to their employees? Organizations right now who are focusing on career succession and career, it's called career path, but I say career pathing, career path, mentorship, sponsorship type programs. These are the main best practices that the research is saying will help increase the retention of their current workforce. And if organizations understand this and know that when they lose an employee, they're spending 3 times more money rehiring a new employee, right? So putting effort into retention strategies is a money saving, option for organizations. So I would say it's around succession planning, career path, making sure employees know they can go from here to here and what it takes to get there, right? The leadership development part of it is very important. And then also just the mentorship and sponsorship that can happen within an organization. And last, like you mentioned earlier, inclusion, right? Creating that space of belonging in an organization has also proven in the research to be one of the main tools when it comes to retention numbers and productivity, right? And people wanting to work more. So yeah, those are kind of some of the top 3 things that we're seeing.
What can leaders and managers do? So we'll take the recruitment piece as read for now. Once they've got their diverse and they've got this inclusive team, they've got the culture right and all of that, what can they then do to maintain that team and make sure that people don't get fed up and, miss the opportunities? And I mean, you talk about the cost of 3 times of their salary, but there's the time lost as well. There's the kind of the knowledge. There's that part of the culture that leaves with them as well. So what can leaders and managers do actively to make sure that they don't lose that?
Yeah, you ask great questions, David. These like $100 million questions, right? That if we have the exact antidote for, everybody would be doing it. That's, for each organization. So I don't think I said in the beginning, I'm an IO psychologist. So an industrial organizational psychologist is, in short, a business psychologist. All my studies, my doctoral studies, have been around what is the most effective way for business to function from a behavioral psychological perspective, as well as from a process, foundational organizational perspective. So this question, I think, taps into that. And some of the way that IOs come into an organization. We always know each organization is different. So each organization has a different vibe and a different frequency and values and processes. Everything about an organization is different. So there isn't a cookie cutter answer to the question, right? But what organizations can do and what we've seen, best practices for leaders to do is really first understand their organization. Who is their customer base, right? Who are their employees? What are their demographics and representation look like across the board? Also processes, all of these very foundational business practices is important for our leaders to really know about, not just say, oh, I know I have 10% African Americans in my, and not the numbers, but know about, meaning know your people. Are they opening those lines of communication with their workforce and their customers? Is there a line of communication open? So really being more humanistic about the way that they do their work. Leaders are having to do that even more now intentionally, even now more with a hybrid workplace atmosphere. If that disconnect of that in-person dynamic that happens is no longer here, we're now Zooming and doing, Google Meets and things like that. So the intentionality to be more relational is really probably one of the biggest steps that leaders can start to do. I do see, though, that it's not a normal way of leading at times, because it's not you sometimes have to have conversations that with different kinds of people that maybe it's might be you're not sure how to start it. Some people just don't even know how to start DEI efforts. They're like, where do we even start, right? So I think it's being able to step outside the box and be more relational is one big thing that helps answer this ultimate big question that you have. I would say that would be the biggest thing, is stepping out of your box, being more relational, and really having that active listening mindset as a leader. Listen. I always say leaders will find the answers to their organizational concerns through their own people, through just listening and asking those questions, being open to hearing the great and hearing the not so great as well.
Yeah. I mean, as you say, every company is different.
Yeah.
Just like every person is different. But I guess when you're talking about the culture of an organization, ultimately it is the sum of the people within it. So
correct.
Exactly as you say, if there's a problem with it, listen to the people.
Sometimes it goes back to these very simplistic, foundational ways of just being people to people, right? And relationship building. It comes back to just how easy it is, but yet how hard it is for us to do it at times, especially in a workplace setting. So sometimes it's just going back to the basics.
I agree. I think just because it's simple doesn't always mean it's easy, though, does it? And I think a lot of the times it's much easier for business leaders in particular to get kind of wrapped up in their own idea of the world and perhaps not listen as much as they should.
Correct. Or they want give me the quick fix model that'll fix this, right? Or what are the 3 steps that I need to do to make this better? Sometimes there is no model. There is no steps. There's just you being a human with the person that's next to you, and just really having that mind of curiosity of, tell me more about your job. Tell me more about what works. Tell me more about what doesn't work. And being that very human, what they call it, human-centric leadership, is what we're seeing that employees are responding more positively to. So if you want positive, productive employees, you will have to adopt this human-centric leadership way of being. Yeah. I know it's hard, right? I guess I wish I could give you a very philosophical model, psychological model that people can do, right? Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Well, I could hire me and I'll bring that to your organization. But ultimately, we will have that conversation about, tell me more about just your people, tell me what kind of people they are, what's important to them, and things like that.
No, I agree. I think that's got to be where any leader starts. You won't always find all the answers there, and it will be some hard work, and it may take some time, but if you don't do it, you're definitely not going to get the answer. So,
and again, we go back to this younger generation, right? I don't know about the UK. I haven't done research on the young generation in the UK. However, in the US, this Gen Z generation that's already in the workplace, that's coming from college to career, has very different traits than millennials. People want to mesh these two generations together. And yes, we can say there are some similarities. However, just like any generation, there are specific traits that this generation is integrated in their identity. So the fact that COVID happened while they're doing this transition from college to career is huge in how they're now looking for a particular employer. So no other generation experienced that time, that time and that experience at that time set in their life, right? In their 19s, 20s, 22s. Our experience when we were 19, 20, going from college to career is completely different. So yes, there's similarities between them and millennials, but there are differences. And we do need to understand what they say. I was on a call with a university leader just this morning, and he said one of his Gen Z employees said, I'm a Zoomer. Like, that's why I'm just a Zoomer, right? Like, get to know I'm a Zoomer. Okay. So that's very different, right? They're Zoomers. This particular Gen Z individual, employee said, I like to Zoom and I'm okay with it. And so, versus a baby boomer who's like, I'm in the office at 8:00 and I'm the first one there and I'm the last one that leaves, right? That's different a way of working than the one that says, I'm a Zoomer and I Zoom and I work when I can. I like flexible work environments. So yeah, it's different. It's changing. And that's why being more human centric as a leader will get you those answers pretty quickly, more than waiting for research report to come out from companies like myself or Deloitte or McKinsey or any other research firm.
Yeah, I mean, speaking as a just a millennial, I'm in the cutoff. I always would have had, if I'd had the opportunity, I would have preferred hybrid working, but it was never a thing, really. The technology's been there for what, like 10 years at least?
Oh, yeah. Hybrid working has been going on, remote working, for 20 so years. Yeah, even probably more.
Yeah. And I mean, I think back to a couple of offices ago when we got a remote meeting request and it was a talk of the office for the whole week. It's like, this is weird. Why are they doing this? Can't we just go and meet in a hotel conference room or something? Right. But actually, you think about it now and it's the time you've saved, the expense you've saved, the fact that you could do like 10 of those in the day if you wanted to. Whereas before it would wipe out probably half a day just to do one of them.
Right.
And it makes so much sense from a business perspective. But
we're so stuck in, and it's change. It's all about change, right? If we talk about change, sometimes we don't want to change. And from a human psychological behavioral standpoint, as also having a psychology background in that, being able to change, it takes time. There is definitely like a curve of, even like acceptance, being angry, right? Like the whole grievance process, it's so real and true. So we are seeing the older generation, we struggle a little bit with that. And it's only because it's been a certain way for so long. So again, we talk a lot about the younger generation, but the older generation also is struggling. So also understanding from their perspective, what can we do to help you integrate this new way of working into who you are, right? Even asking a simple question like that to your older generation. How can I help you? What tools do you need? What kind of training do you need? All of that, again, comes from human-centric leadership and just asking, the different generations, because they're all experiencing everything at different ways, different wavelengths. So yeah, it's important.
Yeah, definitely. And important, I think, for leaders to try and avoid that sort of one size fits all approach, because there's really no such thing, is there? There never has been.
There never has been. I don't know how we keep thinking there is. There really never has been. And the world is changing so fast. And again, the whole multiculturalism of our workplace, it's huge. I think I saw the other day some data points where they showed the younger generation, like a really very simplistic chart of the Caucasian here in the US. Again, I apologize. I wish I should do more research in the UK. But here in the US, like that the Caucasian younger population's now at 40%, and then the rest of it is multicultural, right? The Hispanics, Latin, now there's a mix. There's these, interracial relationships. I mean, yes, it's just changing, which is a beautiful, if we change our perspectives, it can be a beautiful gathering, a mosaic of perspective experiences that can just be that much more informative of the way the organization should be running. So I think sometimes it's also just shifting our perception and our mindset that this is different, but it's different in a good way. It's a different inclusion, right? And it's a different way of thinking. And it's okay, right? Kind of giving people permission to tell themselves it's okay that it's changing. I think sometimes we just want someone to say, it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's human nature, isn't it? But I mean, fearing change just seems like such a waste of time, doesn't it? Because if there's one thing in this world and this life that you're never going to be able to avoid, it's change. So being scared of it is just a waste of energy.
And there's books, right, on failure, like the benefits of failing and the benefits of this and that. Like we're hearing this all over, and books and TED Talks and podcasts about this. Yet how are we internalizing it individually as individuals and as leaders in organizations? Or are we just listening and it's just kind of like doing this, right? It's just kind of going in one ear out the other. So intentionality is a big word I use in any of my work. Intentionality of the leader, intentionality of the leader's actions, intentionality of the team, because there is always a self-accountability that we must place on ourselves when we're in an organization. So leaders, I think, get a lot of like, leaders need to do. In our work, we also say teams need to do, individuals need to do, because it is kind of a dance, right? And they both have to be dancing the same way, or else it's going to be, I can like picture two salsa dancers and then it's like, oh, and it doesn't work out. So it does take both sides to really understand they have a role to play. So we always also advocate that the team member has a role, and it's your responsibility as well to speak up or to, inform. So yeah, it's an interesting dance.
That's its own kind of leadership, though, isn't it? It's kind of leading upwards, if you like. Mm-hmm. We talk about managing upwards quite a bit, don't we? But
yeah, and I think it's just with everything with the pandemic, it's shifted. We recently did some research on post-pandemic leadership behaviors, right? And one of the points that came out from the research is you can't turn back. Like you can't shift it now and although people are trying to bring the organization, like everybody must come back to the office. Well, unfortunately, after the 2 years that we went through, the trauma that a lot of people endured during that time, you can't really go back and expect people to be like, yes, let's go back to the office. There's a lot of mental health, concerns that came through the pandemic. There was a lot of loss. There's just a lot of trauma, really, whether at whatever level, based off the individual it happened, that organizations need to be sensitive to when wanting to go back to the way it used to be. It can't go back to the way it used to be. So that was one of the main research tips, best practices, is you need to go forward and reassess. Reassessment is always a great practice in any organizational, process improvement. Reassess. So yeah, I hate to burst people's bubble, but can't go back.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think in the next couple of years in particular are going to be quite intriguing to see how that all plays out, because I mean we're seeing in the UK as well quite a lot of businesses in the last sort of 6 months, or maybe a bit more for some of them who are perhaps a bit more old-fashioned about it, just deciding, right, pandemic's over now, back to normal, everyone back to the office. I don't care whether you like it or not. That's what your contract says. That's what you're going to do. And I've spoken to a lot of people about it, and a lot of people have just taken that as actually quite insulting.
Right.
Because first of all, you're just running roughshod over what people want, which is always a bad idea in leadership, in my opinion.
Yes.
But second of all, it's as you say, it's trying to go back instead of forward. It's not acknowledging the fact that in a lot of cases, these people that you're now trampling over their opinions have kept your business running during one of the most unprecedented global catastrophes we've had in our professional lives. And you're not acknowledging that. So I think even the language like back to normal can be quite offensive for some people.
Yeah. And I think that what employees are doing now better than I think they probably ever have is speaking up about this and saying, hey, leader, I'm not feeling this. So I think I might step out. So then we have this silent quitting that's happening. We have this, the one right before it. Oh my God, it's just, the everybody's leaving. I forgot the name they gave it. The
Great Resignation.
Thank you. The Great Resignation occurs, and then leaders are like, what did I do? What are we doing wrong? So again, you're right. It could feel like, hey, you're not honoring the trauma and the experience that I've had throughout this 2 years, from even if we go back to diversity, equity, and inclusion, everything that happened after the murder of George Floyd, and all of those, emotions and valid sentiments from the public that came through after that, we can't just go back to normal, right? It's not a place to be. So why, from my opinion, and I say this really, DEI is still essential in an organization's culture, way of being, and it should be foundational within everything that they do. I even say, if you can work your VP of DE&I out of their job, then you're on the right path in your DEI journey, right? Because ultimately, DEI should be part of the essence, the frequency of the organization naturally. So I recently did meet an organization here in the US that is an excellent example of how DEI is part of everything that they do. And they don't have a DEI person on their staff. They don't need one on their staff. It's talked about in everybody in the organization, right? The inclusion part, let's look at the representation of those that aren't part of our company, whether they're veterans or they're someone with a disability. It's because DEI isn't just about race, right? It's about even gender identity. And so this company just talks so naturally like that. I was blown away. I thought, okay, this is what it looks like. It's great to see in this day and age. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, actually, I did get on my soapbox a little bit just then, but actually there are a lot of companies with the hybrid thing who are doing it really well.
Yes, yes.
It's not everyone's getting it wrong.
Correct. Yes, and we should always give, kudos to those and have those organizations talk to others about this is what's working for us. Again, all organizations are different, as we said, but I do think there's value in saying this is how it looks like for us. This is what works for us. This might work for you. Consider it, right? I think that's the thing. Consider it in your organization. And then again, the organization doing their due diligence and saying, well, how does it look like for us? But you're right. There are, I know also a lot of great US companies that this hybrid flex workplace works for them. And so in one of a study that we did, we actually literally took away all the names of hybrid workplace. We did work from home, brick and mortar, and we grouped them into 3 sections, right? The section of people working in an office, brick and mortar, I work in an office, like old fashioned, I go to my office. Then there's a second section where the organization chooses when to work, but the individual chooses where. So that's hybrid, remote, right? Like the organization is giving the employee the opportunity to choose, where do you want to work? You can work at the coffee shop, you can work at home. But then there's that third pillar in the research that we found where the employee chooses when and where. So the organization is not telling them, oh, you need to work at this time between now and here, and you need to work from your house. No, the employee has full autonomy to choose where they work, when they work, how they work. I want to work today from 8 to 4 or just from 8 to 10 in the morning. Like that's flex work environment. So we tried to provide leaders with the clear definitions of what it looks like or what they're saying they provide employees so that from a policy perspective, they're communicating it correctly. And then from an expectation perspective, the employee knows what they're getting when they come into the organization. But yes, I've seen some amazing organizations have flex work being the best thing for them. And even I need one of those things, and I'm sure you've heard of it, David, like the PTO, unlimited PTO, right? That unlimited, you can leave when you want, like you need 2 weeks, take 2 weeks. Some organizations are doing that and don't flinch either. Like, oh God, do I really put that out there to my employees? Give them that full autonomy. Some organizations aren't, and it's showing full productivity increasement in their workforce. So it's interesting. And that's psychological, right? Giving up power.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, I've seen both sides of the argument on the unlimited thing. So there's a couple of examples where they've said, functionally, saying have as much as you want is the same as saying don't take any at all because you're going to be judged.
Right. Right.
So I thought that was quite an interesting point of view on it. And then the other one that I really like the idea of is the 4-day week.
Right.
And
yes.
a lot of studies I've read have shown that actually people end up getting more work done in a working week because the time is limited. It's like this time boxing thing, isn't it? So you've got less time in the week, so you work more productively as a result.
Yeah, and I don't.
Really,
And that I don't know from a psychological perspective, it's like a child when you say, don't have candy. Then they're like, oh, I want candy, I want candy, I want candy. Man, I want candy, but I want candy. But when you say, you know what, here's the candy bag, go at it. But these are the consequences when you eat too much candy. But the autonomy is placed on the child. I think it's kind of the same thing, like, unlimited PTO, but here are the consequences. If you still have to provide your work, you still have to, here's are the expectations, right? When you open the candy bag, basically, or when you close off the candy bag, then they get like, oh, there's like a frustration that occurs. So I do think there's a psychology behind this. I don't know it, so I'm not going to say I do, but a very interesting concept that, yes, I do know a lot of studies are being placed off that 4-week schedule. Yeah, I could see it working. And I could see people being like, I'm going to work. And then on Fridays, they have that mental health day. Or like in our Hispanic world, the siesta time. It's time for siesta. So it's so much good stuff.
yeah.
I hope I've been able to provide your listeners with some tactics, some best practices for them to think about.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge area, isn't it? And yeah, as you say, there's no cookie cutter approach, unfortunately, but
there isn't. And even when we go into organizations and organizations hire us as IO consultants, as cultural relevant consultants with the Institute, we really do take time to understand the organization, who they are, what they look like from a workforce perspective, even process perspective, and policy perspective. That's a big one too. And then, customize the strategy based off of that. And also just the advising that we do with organizations is it's very human centric. It's very like one-on-one, where we're with the C-suite or the ELT, the executive leadership team, and really say, okay, tell us what's really happening here. A lot of the times we've asked our other leaders during inside interviews that we have with leaders, many of them say, we just don't know where to start. We're just not sure how it works. And so having outside experts like myself and all others, I speak for the other experts out, really finding that expert that fits your organization it could be a life-saving part of their work, right? Of their strategy. So, and we understand it's hard. It's hard being a leader and it's hard being an employee. So there's like that dual empathy that happens when coming into an organization.
Yeah. What's the biggest leadership lesson you've learned from your career so far?
So because I'm a researcher, I always go back to the research, right, first, before even my own personal experience. So if you don't mind, I'll go there and then I'll come my own personal opinion.
Yeah.
But according to the research, in today's age, a leader needs to be a multi lens leader, meaning they need to look at any sort of obstacle, concern, problem that happens from multiple lenses, and not be so focused on just a uni-lens way of thinking, right? So they now have to be very open in the way that they look at situations. So if it's from a human-centric lens, then look at the human side. If it's from a process, then look at the process side. And that's hard to do, right? It's hard to be able to look at everything quickly because money's on the table. Of course, I understand that, right? Money's on the table. So we need to make a decision like now. But it is, if that time is taken, they will save time and money. So I'm trying to break the, I don't want to call it a stigma, or maybe it's just the idea that we need to, again, be reactive versus be intentional and really step back and think about what we're doing as an organization. So the research says taking time as a leader when making decisions will create better outcomes. And so I hope that answered the question, but that's what we see all the time as we come up to different kinds of leadership research that we're doing, whether if it's about like particular leadership style, it is always about that, and always about creating an autonomous workplace. And that's hard because that means giving up control. So thinking what that looks like for your organization, is that even possible? Sometimes it's not possible because you do need people in the office, or you do need your employees to be at the location. But there is still options to create a somewhat autonomous workforce that works for the organization's profits, bottom line, and for the workforce, their workforce. Oh, and my personal opinion, I don't know. I like to just stick to the research.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, one informs the other, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I've had opportunities to work with amazing bosses and not so amazing bosses. And just, I think through my own personal experience, if leaders, I think I go back to this human-centric leadership and this very human-focused way of leading people. That definitely is what I see as to be the most productive, most humane, most ethical way of leading your organization. But it's hard when there's deadlines, benchmarks, KPIs, stakeholders, the board asking what's going on. Like I understand, when all those factors are coming into play, I could see how it's easy to get wrapped up in numbers, profit. We got to get it done now. That type of stuff.
I mean, in situations like that where there is the time pressure, I guess it's just about how you view the risk of it, isn't it? And you think about decisions, and I agree, it's a really good point about the more time you can take to make those kind of leadership calls, the better the outcome will be. So you just got to recognize that when you don't have that time, you're sacrificing potentially the quality of the decision. And you've got to be, as a leader, you've got to be comfortable with that sometimes.
Yes.
That's something that I always struggled with, I must say.
I know, it's normal. And then just really being surrounding yourself with other leaders that also feel that passionate about leading in this manner, right? Sometimes I think there's leadership teams where there's always that outlier person that's like, no, we don't, why are we going to do it this way? We've always done it that way. And so sometimes you have, leaders and CEOs are having to make big decisions on who do I surround myself with? Who are my experts? Who are my advocates? I think that's another big part of leadership, is finding those people that challenge your own biases and stereotypes that you might be having, but also are in it for the right intentions, for the betterment of the organization. So it's really about who are you surrounding yourself with? I think that's even a life skill, right? Whoever you're surrounding yourself with they say, if you want to learn more about money, surround yourself with people that know how to make money. Or if you want to learn, whatever it is, they say, surround yourself with the people that, with the same goals of what you like to see. And so I think that's also important. They need to have a strong team. There needs to be a strong leadership team.
Yeah. Well, they say your personality is the sum of, the 4 or 5 people you spend the most time with.
Right.
Is that right? Anyway.
So that sounds about right.
Yeah. And so thinking about what you're saying as well about being able to look through the different lenses. So, if you don't have one of those lenses in your head, get it in one of your close colleagues, right? And have access to it at least.
And sometimes I think we focus a lot on when it comes to like looking at a resume as a leader, right? Like skill sets and education and those are all important. That's important to get the job done. But then there's also should be a piece of just tell me about who you are. Where did you come from? Like your experience, right? That also informs that, like you said, if you're missing that particular perspective in your own thinking, that person coming in, I do think, going back to true foundational values, individual as well as organizational values. That's why values are a big part of organizations, because it's that glue that brings everybody together. So if you're not exemplifying your organizational values, People will see right through that super quickly. And if your ELT is not also exemplifying or role modeling these values that the organization has placed out on their website, then there is going to be a values rub, is what we call it in our world, a values rub.
Yeah, I guess I would call it an authenticity problem.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, you particularly see it between the difference between words and actions. You can spot the bad managers usually, I would say, in maybe 2 or 3 interactions. You can see, they are what they're saying matching up to what they're doing, and vice versa as well. You can spot the good ones pretty fast too, I think.
Yeah. And I do think that executive leaders should have an executive coach. They should have an outside perspective, someone, an expert that understands their industry, understands their everyday transactions, as well as, strategies or things that are going on in the organization to help them also challenge their own thinking. And with that executive coach, I think if we all had our own personal counselor that lived with us, I think we'd all be really a lot better off. But sometimes it's hard to say, I need some help, or I need, I really need someone to challenge me. Sometimes just, that acknowledgement within your own faults, or, I don't want to call them faults, but just something, that what's missing about you being a extraordinary leader, can really be what holds someone back. So having an executive coach or even a mentor, we talk about mentorship all the time, right? Having that best mentor that's really going to say, hey, I don't know about this. Think about it this way. I think that's also very valuable for executive leaders.
Well, I of course agree with that completely. I'm not at all biased in that agreement.
Yeah. And so they need to look for people like us, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll just kind of throw that advertisement out there here on this podcast.
100%.
But there are excellent experts out there that could be that executive coach for leaders, and so look for that.
Yeah. No, I think it is difficult. I mean, it's a self-awareness thing, isn't it? And a lot of leaders struggle with it. I mean, I know I've struggled with it in the past. I think every leader I've ever worked for certainly struggled with it. And it's something that it's very difficult to, even if you do recognize it, it's then very difficult to admit it. And I think that is the value of that independent third party who's not invested in your organization, but also isn't going to be judging you at work all the time if they know these things.
Yes, exactly. And you do need that perspective. You do. There's no doubting that. So instead of fighting it, just get it. Just get the coach, right? And just bring them on. And that definitely, you hit the nail on the head about someone that's outside of the organization that can give you that outside looking in perspective. Could be, super valuable. So yes, we definitely have a lot of wonderful work in our path, David, you and I.
Yeah. It's something I wish I'd had when I was, first-time manager, first-time director, all of that. And it's 150% something I wish all of my past managers had as well.
Definitely. I mean, we're promoting it for younger workers. Have a mentor, have a sponsor, find someone that can help you. It's the same concept. You're just needing somebody that's outside, not completely engulfed in your own, world, that can give you a little bit of perspective. Same thing. Why can't executive leaders just that should be an automatic resource that they have as part of their work.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that a leader can make?
I think there's a couple of big mistakes that leaders can make. I think is one, we've talked about it our time together, is fighting the change, right? So trying to go back to the way it used to be, or this is how we used to do it. So having that not advocating for change could be very detrimental to the leader as well as the organization. The research says that. We've seen that just in different examples that have occurred with organizations. So being able to really embrace the change and all the, whether ickiness or not ickiness that comes with change, being able to do that. So if they're not doing that, one mistake for sure. Another is not listening to their organization and to their own people. Not listening to, yes, their gripes and complaints, and also their ideas and innovative ways of thinking and ideation that comes from just their workforce. So if they're not taking time to do that and are spending more time on profits or other items that are important, I'm not disregarding them in the full operation of an organization, but they're not taking time to listen to their people and really investing in that. That could also be another big mistake. And I think the final one, if we had to, I mean, there's a lot of different best practices, but the final one is not also focusing on the inclusion part of organizations. Profits, money, advancement of an organization, expansion, mergers will all occur when the foundation of inclusion and belonging is already part of the way the organization runs. So we are, as humans, group, we're all about connection, right? We're all about relationships. This is why the pandemic was so hard for many people, because they were isolated. We were forced to be isolated from our families and our friends and our activities and our work. So it just proved, and if nobody sees it, then I don't know what they're thinking or seeing, just proved the importance of inclusion, of belonging, of having somebody advocate for you, or just having that interaction, whether if it's on a Zoom or in person. But that should be something that runs through every part of an organization. So if that's not being talked about at the leadership level, or just even considered, or even saying, I don't know how to start, let's find someone to help us with this, that definitely a big mistake as well.
Yes.
I hope that was simplistic enough.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Next question then. What has been your best experiences of leadership in the workplace?
I think, the best experience of leadership isn't even about a leader. It's about the collaborative efforts of seeing a team come together, them bring their own leadership in their own way, right? To bring the project or the initiative to its full potential, and then executing and then celebrating, right? So the best leadership experience is actually seeing that in action, because yes, the leader has a place in it, but then it's giving the empowerment to the individuals to also lead in whatever expertise they're in. And so everybody's leading and everybody's working and collaborating. There's just a synergy, and you can even feel it in a room when you're around these kinds of groups, right? Where it's just going and flowing, and it's vibrant, and you hear people challenging each other always, with respect and dignity, and then ideas coming out, and then ultimately coming up with a solution, executing, and then celebrating. That is the best leadership experience I've experienced. And I've had the privilege of being part of some teams like that have gone through that. So I know what it feels like. And yeah, to be able to be part of that is ultimate, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of a very brief period in my own career where I had a similar experience. And you think about all of the best leadership experiences, and actually in hindsight, it is when it's more than one leader, when there's a small group of almost equal, and it's a leadership team instead of just an individual. Because when there's only one of them, the worse their instincts have a louder voice, I've found.
Yeah, and they get burnt out. Like these poor leaders are like trying to push the team up the hill, and it's like, oh, I can't do this, right? But it's when they know how to empower everyone in the team. They allow them the psychological safety to be who they are. That's when the magic happens. That's when I think the leadership comes out in everyone, not just the one person that's starting it. So yeah, that is, I always try to tap into that as I lead with my own team. As I lead with our clients, we really try to, so that we give everybody the opportunity to really shine in their own strengths and, in their own power. And yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, definitely something to aspire to. Definitely.
Yeah.
Something else I wanted to ask you then. So we began the conversation with you telling us all about the academic research and bridging the gap between business and academia. So what can business leaders do? Like how can they effectively use academic research as a decision-making tool?
Yeah. Oh my, you're doing such great work. That's a great question because I find this all the time. One, leaders should not dismiss academic research as a tool. When I tell people I'm a researcher, they're like, ooh, that doesn't sound like fun. And I'm like, hashtag research is sexy. Like, it is fun, right? You just need to find the right person to do the research for you, but it can be extremely powerful in the information that gets provided to you after the research is done. So I think the biggest point that I always try to exemplify to my leaders is that, one, you can get the research. Don't just depend on what you hear on LinkedIn or on, oh, this is the current trend of how to lead. Like, there's a lot of information being thrown at us from all different channels, as we know. And if we just focus on one without diligently understanding where it comes from, who is the person talking about this particular piece of information, how credible are they? I always tell my clients, be vigilant information seekers. So don't believe everything that you're reading that will work for you and your organization. So research is that tool. Data analytics is a tool, right? I think there are two different types of information that you'll get from academic research versus people analytics, data analytics. But there's still two valuable tools that there are experts out there like myself that can provide you both, and take time to listen and look at that piece. Some people think, God, does it take you a long time to research? Are you like in front of a computer all day? And I'm telling them, no, this is why I'm an expert at it. I could do it swift through at least 25 journal articles in an hour because I have this skill set to do that. So no, you won't. This is what we do, kind of basically. I'm sure a data analytics person says the same thing. Oh, I sift through numbers and formulas and all these kinds of tests, right? And for them, it's fine. So I always say, just find the right expert. Don't dismiss don't assume that it's time consuming, that it's not going to be informative. And the whole perception that it's like, oh, academics is for academics is not true. There is a bridge, and there should be a bridge between the amount of time academics are placing on a topic to how it can be translated to the full workforce. That's definitely why I opened my business. So I hashtag research is sexy. That's my hashtag. I'm going to make a t-shirt.
Like it. Yeah. And the academic approach and mindset has the most to offer business, I think, not just business, actually society, frankly, is in this lost art of critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And again, getting on the soapbox, but I 100% blame social media for this. Yeah. The way the algorithm works, right? The more of one particular thing you read, the more of that thing it will show you. And they're bias generators. That's all they really are. And so if you don't have the mindset, the understanding, the will really to go out and apply that critical thought, to seek alternative views, to consider the balance of the evidence, you're just going to fall into the trap over and over and over again. And we could equate that to politics and certain elections that have happened in both of our countries in recent years. The whole Cambridge Analytica debacle or scandal or whatever you want to call it.
And it does just create that singular way of thinking. You're right. And we're seeing this in the younger generation, that critical thinking piece is missing for sure. So if there's a training that needs to happen for organizations with this younger generation, it is that to have to reteach critical thinking because they're so used to 30 seconds TikTok. No, don't like that one. No, don't like that one. No, don't like. You're right. And then the algorithm. I'll sit on the soapbox with you because you're exactly right. It's so true and real. How this social media is programming our thinking and our analytical way of thinking. So true. Yes, we should do another podcast on that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's the short attention span, you're right. But it's also, if social media is your primary source of information about the world, that's the real risk, I think, because, I mean, we could also talk about kind of journalism and media and the way that they've had to dumb down in order to compete with social media, but that might be getting too high on the soapbox for today. I might
It might be
fall
too
off,
late over
but-
there for that topic today.
Yeah, it's definitely too late in the day for that here. Yeah.
Definitely a topic that should be unpacked more,
Yeah, it
talked
should.
about more. What does that look like? Yeah, because it's a real thing. And I don't know, I feel sometimes not that we downplay the impact of social media, but we disregard the huge impact that social media is having on our younger generation, and on just how the thinking is happening. The thinking is starting to come in play in the brain. I'm sure there's a lot of neuroscience around this topic for sure.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I think it's something that's only going to get worse now, because we've got the first generation now to reach adulthood having lived their entire lives since the invention of social media.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of terrifying to me anyway. That makes me feel really old. But,
Right.
but I mean, even thinking back, so when I was at secondary level education in the UK here, critical thinking was something we were taught at school.
Okay.
I don't think they teach that anymore, unless you get to like college degree level.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure it's probably somewhat integrated in some sort of curriculum base.
I hope so.
And like here, I know, right? I hope so. Here in the high school level in the US. But I don't know if it's an intentional conversation or teaching that's happening. Probably not. And even I've noticed in the college level curriculum and training, it's also probably not as prevalent as it should be as well. So definitely a big a skill set that is not being talked about enough and should be part of the new way of teaching. Just how to get them to think outside of the box is quite interesting. Another thing on research is that we find that people tell us, well, it's the academics, that's all they're doing is just this research. So why even bother? Or it doesn't relate to me. I can't even understand it. Or, it's too complicated, too many words. And that all of that is true. However, there is this translation that can take place for the practitioner to be able to take what has been studied and proven and take it into their own hands to place into their organizations. So, there's more out there. There's more out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that mistranslation, but also I think quite a lot of academics, they create almost a deliberate obfuscation around what they're doing in order to justify their expertise, if you know what I mean. And I think that's why what you're doing is so important, because as you say, you're bridging that gap and being able to present that research in a way that is accessible to practitioners who don't have the time or the inclination to go and read those 25 plus journal articles. And it is important. And, and I understand the reasons why the academic world works like that. It makes sense to me. I get it. But at the same time, it's not always that helpful.
That's very true. I just read an article the other day and I'm like, I pretty much synthesize a whole paragraph in like 3 words. And I'm like, why do they make it so complicated? This is such good stuff. Like everybody else needs to know this, but they've made it and so yeah. Yes, I know. It's the academic world.
It's the terminology and the acronyms for me. That's what always gets me.
I always say I'm a practitioner at heart, although I'm an academic.
Yeah. Oh, it's all fun and games, though.
Yes, for sure.
Leadership Heroes.
If you had to pick a person, alive or dead, past, present, real, fictitious, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
I know, Dave. This is great questions all around. And I'll probably not going to answer it in a singular one person response. I'll blame it because I'm Hispanic and I'm all about the cultivistic way of being, and we're all about the group and everything. I think that it's the leadership of our ancestors that have come before us, have been, faced with adversity more at a different level than we are seeing in our lifetime. So it would be those individuals that really stepped out of the stereotype, the status quo, and created their own path, right, to create a better life for themselves, their families, and have created that path for others to also walk through. So I think those leaders in our past, and I'm sure all of us can think of one or two people that really paved that way for them to be who they are today. So I do give thanks and honor those individuals that have created those paths and try to pay it forward, right, to create a path for other women, other Latinas that would never thought they could do the highest level of education and be a doctor. You can, and just women in general to know that there is a big place for us. We need to speak up, use our voice, and really take that place unapologetically.
Absolutely. Quite right too.
Yeah.
I think that's a very different perspective to the answers I tend to get on this question, but I like it. And I think we should all, every now and then, just be thankful to our ancestors.
Yep.
I like it. I'm on board with that.
Thank you. Yes, I do it all the time. That's a big part of who we are and our identity.
Yeah.
Are those people that came before us. So we need to pave the way for the next generation.
Absolutely. Well, that's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed that. And
me too.
Thank you again for taking the time to speak with me today.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you. Please reach out to me if any questions. And I hope that we're able to provide insight. I'm always open to reach out to the Bridgify group, El Puente Institute, myself on LinkedIn, Dr. Patricia Delgado Peña on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll have all my information too, David, you can share. Always happy to get on a call and just discuss and see how that we can help organizations just really be at the optimal level that we know that they can be. And thank you for your time, and hope that your Fridays ends a lot better than just a podcast.
Well, it's just started raining outside, so the odds aren't
no.
great.
Come to Texas, David. Come to Texas.
Yeah, maybe I will one day. Well, again, I did go there once. Anyway, I'm digressing. End of episode. Thank you again so much for your time. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye. Thank you again, Patty, for your time today. That was much appreciated. A really good conversation that I thoroughly enjoyed. Listeners, if you would like to learn more about the Bridgify group and the work they do in academia and bringing that into the practitioner's world, I have put the link to the website in the episode description, so feel free to click on that to learn more. If leadership is something you're interested in or you need help with, and if what we've talked about today has struck a chord with you at all, and you'd like to learn more about leading with integrity, there's another link in the episode description, as you know by now, I'm sure. So please feel free to click on that as well and get in touch with me. And I've also put in there the link to my LinkedIn profile, so you can reach out to me directly there as well. That's all I've got time for today. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully I will speak to you again next week. In the meantime, remember, be a leader, not a boss.